Hello class. Today we are going to be talking about the Korean War. The Korean War was the first hot war of the Cold War, and it lasted from 1950 to 1953. After the Second World War, the Allies decided to divide Korea at the 38th parallel. The 38th parallel is the 38th line of latitude. Now, there are two 38th parallels. This one is north of the equator. North Korea would go under the trusteeship of the Soviet Union, and the South would be under the trusteeship of the Americans. And two different countries would develop. The North would become communist, and the South would become democratic. Now, if we look back when we discussed World War II, when Germany lost the war, they lost their land. And Germany was divided into two countries, West Germany and East Germany. West Germany was under the control of the Americans, French, and British, and was democratic. East Germany was controlled by the Soviet Union and was communist. What would happen in Korea would be the same exact thing. Korea was a colony of Japan, and Japan lost World War II, so they lost their land. And the winners of the war decided to divide it up. North Korea would go under the Soviet Union and be communist. South Korea would go to the Americans and be democratic. Now, both sides wanted to reunify the country under their own rule. And in 1950, after a number of small skirmishes at the border, war would break out between North and South Korea. The U.S. backed and fought with the South, and the Soviet Union backed the North. North Korea, at the beginning of the war, surprised South Korea and the Americans and pushed them all the way down to Busan. When it got all the way down to Busan, the Americans became alarmed and requested to the United Nations to help South Korea. The United Nations granted that request and placed General Douglas MacArthur as the Supreme Allied Commander, and he was in charge of the UN forces in Korea. Under the leadership of General MacArthur, South Korea pushed North Korea all the way up to the Yalu River. Now, this would really alarm the Chinese. The Chinese feared this democratic country pushing up to their borders, and they wanted to have that buffer zone of North Korea, so they would become involved in the war. After China would become involved in the war, they would push the Americans back and force them to retreat. They pushed them back past the 38th parallel. And after some more fighting, the Americans would push back just to about the 38th parallel, and that's when the war would end. After 3 years, the two sides fought to a stalemate, and they kept the country divided at the 38th parallel. Okay, class, so if you have any questions on this, please write them down and bring them to class with you. We will be going more in depth on this topic, and we will discuss President Truman and General MacArthur's relationship in class. So, see you in class.